I asked for just a 10% raise. After 18 years, my CEO burst into laughter and said, "Everyone's replaceable." So I called his biggest rival with my engineering systems. One meeting later, they offered me double salary and VP position. My CEO had no idea what was coming. 10%. That's all I asked for. Hudson Garrett's laughter echoed through his corner office like I'd just told him the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "You want a 10% raise? After 18 years?" He couldn't even finish the sentence before another wave of laughter hit him. I stood there holding my folder of documentation, every process improvement, every cost saving, innovation I'd developed over nearly 2 decades at Porter Precision Manufacturing. I'm Calvin Bennett, by the way. 49 years old, senior manufacturing systems engineer, and until that moment, the kind of guy who keeps his head down and lets his work speak for itself. Former Navy technician turned civilian engineer, spent my whole career believing that good work gets rewarded eventually. Started at Porter when I was 31, fresh out of the service with big dreams about building something that mattered. The lean manufacturing system I designed saved us $2.8 million last quarter alone, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The quality control processes for the Eastwood contract cut defect rates by 85%. Hudson waved his hand like he was swatting away a fly. "Everyone's replaceable, Calvin. Even you." He leaned back in his leather chair, that Harvard MBA smirk plastered across his face. "If you think you're worth more, feel free to test the market." That's when I knew what I had to do. See, what Hudson never understood was what happened on the factory floor every day. While he was in board meetings talking about synergies and market positioning, I was down there with the guys running the machines. Tommy Rodriguez had been operating the main stamping press for 12 years. Maria Santos ran quality inspection with an eye that could spot a defect from 20 feet away. These weren't just employees to me. They were the people who made my systems work. My lean manufacturing protocols didn't come from some business school textbook. They came from watching Tommy struggle with material flow bottlenecks during shift changes. From seeing Maria catch problems that our expensive inspection equipment missed. From understanding that the best innovations happen when you actually know how things work instead of just how they look on a spreadsheet. The system I'd developed for Eastwood wasn't just about efficiency metrics. It was about reducing the physical strain on workers while improving output quality. The old process had guys lifting 50-pound components 200 times per shift. My redesign used pneumatic assists and better workflow staging. Productivity went up 35%, but more importantly, workplace injuries dropped to 0. "I understand completely," I said, closing my folder. "Thanks for clarifying where I stand. Listen, Calvin." His voice softened with fake concern. "You're good at what you do, but you're essentially a back-office function. The board barely knows your name. That's just business. Back-office function. Right. Because apparently designing the manufacturing systems that actually make the products doesn't count as real business." I walked back to my desk, past the glass offices of managers who'd been here half as long as me. My workstation sat in the corner of the engineering bay, surrounded by the CAD terminals and testing equipment I'd helped select and configure. The place I'd called home for 18 years. From my desk, I could see through the windows down to the factory floor where third shift was just starting up. My computer screen showed the quarterly company newsletter, featuring Hudson's innovative manufacturing revolution that had landed the Eastwood automotive contract. My revolution. My 60-hour weeks for 8 months straight. My solution that cut their production cost by 35% and made Porter their preferred supplier. The article had a nice photo of Hudson shaking hands with Eastwood's procurement director. No mention of the engineer who'd actually designed the systems that made it possible. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a worn leather notebook. Inside were my personal project notes from over the years. Ideas I'd developed at home. Processes I'd refined on my own laptop during weekends. Innovations I'd documented meticulously with dates and development logs. Things the company had implemented because I'd been too eager to prove myself, too willing to share without formal acquisition paperwork. I flipped to my notes from 4 years ago. The lean manufacturing protocols that became the backbone of our entire operation. At the top of the page, in my own handwriting, personal project, precision manufacturing, optimization, developed at home, started March 15, 2020. What Hudson didn't know, what Porter's legal team had never bothered to investigate, was that I'd never signed over the rights to my most valuable innovations. The standard employment contract covered work done during company hours using company resources. My breakthrough processes were documented as personal projects, developed on my own time with my own equipment. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my Navy years working on aircraft carrier mechanical systems. Everything there was about precision, reliability, and understanding that people's lives depended on getting the details right. When I transitioned to civilian manufacturing, I brought that same mindset. Every system I designed wasn't just about numbers on a report. It was about creating something that actually worked in the real world. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd saved but never called. Diana Walsh, VP of Operations at Velocity Industrial Systems, our biggest competitor. She'd reached out several times over the years through LinkedIn and industry conferences. Her last message, sent 4 months ago: "The offer stands whenever you're ready, Calvin. We need innovators who understand real manufacturing." My finger hovered over the call button. 18 years of loyalty screamed at me to stop. Then I remembered Hudson's laughter. I pressed call. Diana Walsh, speaking. "This is Calvin Bennett from Porter Precision. I think it's time we had that conversation you mentioned." "Calvin, I was starting to think you'd never call. Are you free for dinner tonight?" 3 hours later, I sat across from Diana at Richardson's Steakhouse downtown. She'd made the reservation with one phone call. The place had white tablecloths and waiters in bow ties. Not exactly my usual scene, but Diana seemed comfortable here. "I've been following your work for years," Diana said, cutting into her steak. The sudden improvements in Porter's efficiency metrics, the patent applications that mysteriously appeared after gaps in your conference presentations. Those lean manufacturing systems for Eastwood were revolutionary. "How did you know that was my work?" Diana smiled. "Because Hudson Garrett couldn't engineer his way out of a paper bag, let alone develop sophisticated manufacturing protocols. When we tried to reverse engineer your systems and failed, that's when I knew we needed the brain behind them." She wasn't wrong. Hudson's background was all finance and marketing. His father had founded Porter back in the 80s, and Hudson had grown up expecting to inherit the business. When the old man retired 3 years ago, Hudson stepped right into the CEO role. Never spent a day on a production line. Never understood how the machines actually worked. "What exactly are you offering?" I asked. "VP of Manufacturing Systems. Double your current salary, profit sharing, your own engineering team." She leaned forward. "But more importantly, recognition. Your name on your patents, proper credit for your innovations." The recognition part hit different than the money. Don't get me wrong. Doubling my salary would be life-changing. But having my name on the work I'd actually done? That meant something. I placed my notebook on the table. "I have documentation proving these systems were personal projects. Porter implemented them, but never formally acquired the intellectual property." Diana's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. "That's quite an oversight on their legal department's part." "Hudson doesn't value back-office functions," I said. "Including legal oversight, apparently." We talked for another hour about technical specifics. Diana knew her stuff. She'd started as a process engineer herself before moving into management. When I explained the pneumatic assist modifications I'd developed for heavy component handling, she immediately understood the worker safety implications. When I described the statistical process control algorithms I'd written, she asked smart questions about data collection intervals and control limits. This was what I'd been missing at Porter. Someone who actually understood the engineering behind the business decisions. 2 weeks. That's what I told her I needed. 2 weeks to wrap up my current projects and make the transition clean. Diana agreed, but I could see she was eager to get started. Velocity had been losing ground to Porter for the past 2 years, ever since my innovations had gone live. Now she had a chance to turn that around. The drive home gave me time to think. 18 years is a long time at one company. I knew every corner of that factory, every quirk of every machine. I'd trained most of the current engineering staff. Hell, I'd helped design the workspace layout when they expanded the facility in 2018. But loyalty has to work both ways. I'd given Porter the best years of my career, and Hudson had just made it clear that meant nothing to him. The next morning, I started preparing my transition. First step was documenting everything I'd officially developed for Porter versus my personal projects. The company owned plenty of my work. Standard process improvements, equipment specifications, training materials. But the core innovations that had transformed their manufacturing efficiency? Those were mine. I spent the weekend going through my files both at work and at home. The pattern was clear. Every major breakthrough had started as a personal project. I'd develop the concept at home, test it on my own laptop, then bring it to work as a proposed improvement. Porter had been happy to implement my ideas, But they'd never bothered with the paperwork to actually acquire them. My biggest concern was the guys on the floor. Tommy, Maria, and the rest of the crew hadn't done anything wrong. They were good people who just wanted to do their jobs and take care of their families. If Porter struggled after I left, they'd be the ones to suffer. But I also knew that Velocity had a better reputation for treating their workers fairly. Diana had mentioned they were looking to expand their Ohio operations. Maybe there would be opportunities for the good people at Porter if things went south. Monday morning arrived with typical factory noise. The 6 a.m. shift change, the rumble of machinery starting up, the familiar rhythms I'd been hearing for 18 years. I walked through the plant before heading to my office, checking on the weekend production numbers, saying hello to the early crew. Everything was running smooth. The systems I'd designed were working exactly as intended. The Eastwood line was producing parts at a 99.2% quality rate. The new pneumatic assists had eliminated the repetitive stress injuries that had plagued the heavy assembly area. Material flow was optimized to the point where we rarely had bottlenecks anymore. It was good work I was proud of. And Hudson thought it was replaceable. I spent the next week quietly completing my documentation. Every personal project was cataloged with development dates, design iterations, and implementation records. I made copies of all the emails where I'd offered to let Porter formally acquire my innovations. Hudson's dismissive responses were particularly interesting reading. The legal research took some time, but the conclusion was clear. My personal intellectual property had never been transferred to Porter. They'd implemented my systems based on my recommendations, but they'd never completed any acquisition process. It was sloppy corporate governance, the kind of oversight that happens when leadership doesn't value the legal details. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed. Documentation, legal clarity, and a plan for moving forward. Friday afternoon, I typed up my resignation letter. Saturday morning, I called Diana Walsh. "I'm ready," I said when she answered. "Excellent. Can you start Monday? Give me 2 weeks to do this right. But yes, I'm coming to Velocity." There was satisfaction in her voice when she responded. "Welcome to the team, Calvin. This is going to be fun." Monday morning, I walked into Hudson's office with my resignation letter. He was staring at his computer screen, probably reviewing the latest quarterly projections that looked good thanks to the systems I'd built. 2 weeks' notice, he said, barely glancing at the document. "Where are you heading?" I thought about lying but decided honesty would have more impact. Velocity Industrial Systems. That got his attention. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "Our competitor? That's unfortunate timing. We're in final negotiations with Eastwood to expand our contract." "I know. I designed the manufacturing protocols for that proposal." Hudson's expression shifted from casual dismissal to genuine concern. The color drained from his face as he realized what this meant. "We should discuss retention options. Perhaps that raise you mentioned. Velocity is offering double my salary plus VP position and profit sharing." He forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow now. "They're overpaying. You'll be disappointed when reality sets in." "We'll see," I said, and walked out. My last 2 weeks at Porter were strange. Word got around quickly that I was leaving for Velocity. Some people were shocked, others said they saw it coming. Tommy Rodriguez pulled me aside on Tuesday. "You really going to the competition, Cal?" "Yeah, Tommy. It's time." He nodded slowly. "Can't say I blame you. Hudson's been taking credit for your work since day one. We all know who really designed these systems." That meant something. The guys on the floor knew. They'd always known. I spent those final days completing my transition documents and training my replacement. A bright kid named Andy Patterson, fresh out of Ohio State's engineering program. He was eager but terrified, which I understood. The systems he was inheriting were complex. The pneumatic assist controls alone had 47 different parameters, I explained, walking him through the main assembly line. Each station is calibrated for specific component weights and operator heights. You change one setting without understanding the downstream effects, and you'll have bottlenecks within an hour. Andy took notes frantically. "How long did it take you to learn all this?" "Years," I said honestly. "But don't worry, the documentation is solid, and the operators know these systems inside and out. Listen to them. They'll teach you things no engineering textbook ever could." I also quietly backed up all my personal project documentation and made copies of the email chains where I'd offered to let Porter acquire my innovations. Hudson's responses were particularly telling. One from 2021 read, "Just implement it if it works." We'll handle the paperwork later. That paperwork had never materialized. On Thursday of my final week, I met with Preston Vance, Porter's legal counsel, for the standard exit interview. Just routine paperwork, he assured me, sliding documents across his desk. Non-compete agreement, confidentiality clauses, confirmation you're not taking company property. I reviewed everything carefully. The non-compete wasn't in my original employment contract, and I wasn't signing it now. As for company property, I was taking only what belonged to me. I'm not signing the non-compete, I told Vance. It wasn't part of my original agreement. It's standard procedure now, he said, looking uncomfortable. Not for me. And regarding company property, I'm taking my personal intellectual property that was never formally acquired by Porter. What personal property? Vance's expression tightened. I opened my notebook, showing him the dated entries. These manufacturing systems were developed on my personal time using my own resources. Porter implemented them but never completed any acquisition process. I have the documentation to prove it. Vance flipped through my notebook, his face growing pale. These are the core systems we use for everything. Yes, they are, I said calmly. He stared at me, then at the notebook. I need to make some calls. Of course, but my employment ends Friday, and my personal property leaves with me. Friday afternoon arrived gray and drizzly, typical Ohio weather for late fall. I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to the engineering team, and walked through the factory one last time. The machines hummed with the efficiency I'd helped create. The workers moved with the rhythm of processes I'd designed. It was good work, even if Hudson had never appreciated it. Maria Santos was running quality checks on the Eastwood line. She looked up when she saw me. Heard you're leaving us, she said. New opportunities, Maria. But these systems will keep running smooth. You know them better than anyone. She smiled. Take care of yourself, Cal. And good luck with whatever comes next. I walked out of Porter Precision Manufacturing at 5:30 p.m., carrying a box with my personal items and 18 years of memories. My truck started on the second try, same as always. Some things never change. Monday morning at Velocity felt like stepping into the future. Their facility was newer, better organized, with modern equipment and clean work areas. Diana Walsh met me at reception personally. Welcome to Velocity, Calvin. Ready to change the industry? My new office had windows overlooking their main production floor. Real windows, not the interior glass partitions I'd gotten used to at Porter. I could see their current manufacturing setup, and immediately spotted areas for improvement. The material flow patterns were inefficient, creating unnecessary worker movement. The quality control stations were positioned wrong for optimal visual inspection. The pneumatic systems looked like they'd been installed by someone who'd read the manual but never actually used the equipment. Diana introduced me to my team, 8 engineers ranging from recent graduates to industry veterans. They were eager to learn what I'd brought from Porter, but I had bigger plans than just copying old systems. We're not here to recreate Porter's processes, I told them during our first team meeting. We're here to build something better. Something that Porter can't match, even if they tried. Over the next 6 weeks, we redesigned Velocity's entire manufacturing approach. The lean principles I developed were just the starting point. We integrated predictive maintenance algorithms, improved worker ergonomics, and implemented real-time quality monitoring that caught defects before they became problems. The results were immediate. Production efficiency jumped 28%. Operating costs dropped 22%. Quality metrics improved across every product line. But more importantly, workplace injuries fell to nearly zero, and employee satisfaction surveys showed significant improvement. Our sales team noticed. They started approaching clients with performance data that Porter couldn't match. The morning Eastwood announced they were switching their contract to Velocity, my phone started buzzing. Hudson's name flashed on the screen 4 times before he left a message. Calvin, this is Hudson. We need to discuss consulting opportunities immediately. Porter is prepared to offer substantial compensation. Please call me back. I saved the message but didn't return the call. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 months ago, I'd asked for a 10% raise and got laughed at. Now he was talking about substantial compensation. 3 days later, Hudson was waiting by my car in the Velocity parking garage. The confident CEO swagger was gone. He looked tired, older somehow. This is inappropriate, I said, keeping my distance. You've put 200 jobs at risk, he said, his voice urgent. Porter is facing a crisis because of what you took. I didn't take anything that belonged to Porter. I took my personal intellectual property that Porter used without proper acquisition. Nobody will believe that. It looks like corporate theft. I have dated documentation of every project, every implementation, every conversation where ownership was never transferred. Your legal team never did their job properly. Hudson stepped closer. Name your price. Whatever Velocity is paying, we'll triple it. I thought about those 18 years, sitting at my desk while he took credit for my work. About his laughter when I asked for basic recognition. You once told me everyone's replaceable. Even me. I'm just following your business philosophy. The next quarter's results were devastating for Porter. Without the Eastwood contract, they lost 40% of their revenue. Their stock dropped 48% in 6 weeks. The board started asking hard questions about how they'd become so dependent on systems they didn't actually own. Industry publications ran stories about Porter's mysterious technical collapse. Manufacturing Weekly called it a catastrophic loss of institutional knowledge. The Wall Street Journal described it as a case study in poor intellectual property management. Nobody mentioned Hudson's laughter in his corner office, but the message was clear. Companies that don't value their talent pay the price. Porter laid off 180 employees. I watched the announcement from my office while reviewing expansion plans for Velocity's new automotive division. Each name on the layoff list was someone I'd worked with. Someone I respected. Tommy Rodriguez, Maria Santos. Good people who didn't deserve to suffer for Hudson's arrogance. That's when Diana and I had a serious conversation about corporate responsibility. We can't just celebrate Porter's failure, I told her. These are real people with families and mortgages. What do you have in mind? She asked. Velocity launched Operation Opportunity the following week. We committed to interviewing every qualified former Porter employee. For specialized positions we couldn't fill immediately, we partnered with regional manufacturers to create placement services. For workers nearing retirement, we offered consulting contracts that provided bridge income until their pensions kicked in. Tommy Rodriguez became my lead technician for pneumatic systems installation. Maria Santos joined our quality control team as a senior inspector. Within 6 months, we'd hired 73 former Porter employees. The local business press called it innovative competitor displacement strategy. But for me it was just doing right by people who'd supported my work for years. Then came the lawsuit. Porter sued me for theft of intellectual property and corporate sabotage. Their legal team filed extensive documentation claiming I'd stolen proprietary manufacturing processes. Hudson gave interviews to trade publications about protecting American companies from industrial espionage. The case fell apart during discovery. My dated documentation proved every major innovation had originated as a personal project. The email chains showed Hudson explicitly dismissing the need for formal IP acquisition. Most damaging was a recorded board meeting where Hudson had boasted about getting brilliant engineering work without paying acquisition costs. The judge dismissed the case with prejudice, noting Porter's failure to secure proper ownership of innovations they'd implemented. The legal fees alone cost Porter another $1 million they couldn't afford. The morning after the dismissal, I received an unexpected visitor. Preston Vance, looking considerably older than during my exit interview. I was let go last month, he said, sitting heavily in my office chair. Part of the final cuts. I'm sorry to hear that. Velocity is expanding our legal team if you're interested. He shook his head. That's not why I came. It's about your innovations, your documentation. I tensed. The court already ruled on that. I know. And they ruled correctly. Vance met my eyes. But there's something you should know. After you mentioned your personal projects in the exit interview, I went straight to Hudson. Showed him emails from years back where you'd offered to let the company formally acquire your work. You even suggested reasonable compensation terms. I remembered those emails now. I'd been trying to do the right thing, make everything official. Hudson replied, dismissing the need for formal acquisition. Vance continued. Said something like, just implement it if it works, we'll handle the paperwork later. When you left and Velocity started using your systems, he ordered me to sue you anyway. Despite knowing we had no case. Why are you telling me this now? Because what happened to Porter wasn't just about you taking your innovations elsewhere. It was about years of systematic arrogance. Hudson didn't just undervalue you. He treated everyone like replaceable parts. Legal, operations, engineering. When you left, it revealed how broken everything was. 6 months later, Porter filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Hudson was forced to resign. The board brought in turnaround specialists, but it was too late. Velocity had captured most of their market share. And other competitors had moved into the gaps. Today, I sit in my VP office at Velocity, looking out at our expanded manufacturing floor. My team has grown to 20 engineers. We hold 15 patents with my name prominently listed. Industry awards line my bookshelf. But the real satisfaction comes from seeing Tommy Rodriguez training new technicians, watching Maria Santos mentor young quality inspectors, knowing that good people found better opportunities. Sometimes young engineers ask me when they should stand up for themselves. My answer is simple. Don't wait 18 years like I did. Know your worth, document your contributions, and never let anyone convince you that good work doesn't deserve recognition. 18 years of loyalty should mean something. When it doesn't, sometimes the most powerful response is proving them wrong.